Hi. Hi, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So, just a couple of announcements before we jump into the material. Today we have a lot of exciting stuff. This Friday, I think there'll be one or two, maybe other Fridays in the semester, we have a guest lecture. Now, I know that on Fridays, people usually don't go to class. I know that you'll want to watch it on video, but I ask you, I'm making a special request to be here on Friday, and I'll also email out the class. Our speaker is coming from afar, and afar being Richmond, Virginia. She's one of the leading scholars on leadership. She's also going to introduce this, whom I think is probably the founder of the field of organizational behavior, a woman by the name of Mary Parker Follett, whose name has not come up a lot when people talk about the founders of the field, and her name should come up more. It's been a very male-dominated field for many years, and I think the work that she's doing, bringing up that name again, should not go unrecognized. She's going to be here. She's a wonderful speaker, one of the leading scholars, and please be here. It wouldn't be nice if she just had 3 people here in the front row or 4 people up there. So please do make an effort to come on Friday. I'll also email you about it later today or tomorrow. Also, for those of you interested, there is, especially for the economists and the psychologists, but for everyone, Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel Prize laureate in economics, but does a lot of work in psychology. He's actually in the Princeton Psychology Department. He's coming to speak this afternoon. He'll be speaking in William James Hall 1. That's the basement of William James Hall at 4 o'clock. So I highly recommend going to listen to him. I want to say a couple of words just about the midterm. I've received quite a few emails about it. So here is what the midterm will look like. There'll be some multiple choice questions. There'll be some very straightforward, basic, objective questions. They'll only be drawn from the readings and the lecture. So if you had spoken about something in section that wasn't discussed in the readings or in the lecture, it will not appear on the midterm. The sections are there to reinforce the material. The reason we're doing it is because we cannot have uniformity across all sections. We tried it, we thought it would work at the beginning, but it just doesn't work, and every section leader brings in his or her strength, which is more important for us than covering exactly the same material. Only what is covered in the readings. The lecture, very straightforward. There will be no trick questions. It's not in paragraph 7 of the article by Heath. He writes about ... You will not have such questions. When you read the articles, understand the general principles in the article, know what the article is about, the main points. With the lectures, what appears on the PowerPoints, again, not in terms of you have to memorize quotes, but central ideas. Or when I talk about certain studies, the central idea in that study. We're not looking here for gotcha games, just so that you get I'm looking at it actually, both the midterm and the final, as an opportunity for you to synthesize the material. Because right now you're getting bits and pieces. You remember one thing from the first lecture, but can't really tie it to the 7th lecture. Well, the midterm will help you do it, or studying for the midterm, studying for the final will help you do that. By the way, that's the only real value I see in the exams. It's an opportunity to synthesize the material. Are there any questions about this or anything else? About the midterm or anything else? Yes? Didn't hear a thing, sorry. No, it's not all multiple choice. There are also short questions. But, what is the main idea in this study, for example? I don't know. I'm actually not going to write the midterm, your TFs are, but I'm going to synthesize it and make sure that it's things that are covered in the material. So yeah, it's both. Other questions or comments? Yeah, the lecture videos will be online. I'm a little bit concerned about, so the midterm is Monday week. I'm a little bit concerned about the Wednesday lecture, so just make sure you're here. But I'm gonna tell them it's a midterm and to make special effort to get it online. But yes. Yeah. Yeah, thesis writers, I said it in the first class, so for those of you who weren't here, thesis writers can take it after spring break. Been there, done that, I know that you're somewhat busy. It's good to see you in class, actually. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. I want to start today by talking about something we spoke about last time, and I didn't want to elaborate on it, or I didn't plan rather to elaborate too much, but I think it's a critical issue. What do you do with people who have weaknesses and serious weaknesses? I'm not even just talking about, well, I'm not that good with a large audience, or I'm not that good, in terms of ability to read other people's feelings. These are important weaknesses to consider, but I'm talking about weaknesses such as the gentleman who was sitting here last time talking, when you have dyslexic people, or if you have people who have certain learning disabilities. How can we say let's focus on their strengths rather than on their weaknesses? Well, the thing is, and I want to reinforce this, I'm not saying only focus on strengths. I'm not saying do only appreciative inquiry, focus on the good things, on the things that work. What I'm saying is let's shift the pendulum, because our society, our culture right now is deficiency focused. Our society right now is weakness focused. Remember the study that was run throughout the world, Asia, Middle East, Africa, Europe, and the Americas, found that universally, when you ask people what is more important for you to work on, they said, on our weaknesses. And the right answer is both. And I would say with even a little bit more focus on the strength. So I want to focus on that. And Jeff Perotti, who many of you know, told me a story about one of his students, and actually after class, and I asked him to share it with you. So, do you want this, or? Do you want to sing, or do you want to tell?
All right. Thanks, Tal. First, I just wanted to handle one logistical thing before we forget. I know that's a little bit late in the game, but we did get a course pack together of all the readings printed out, and it's at Nomen Copy for anybody who wants to buy a printed copy of all the articles that are online, but it's a hefty amount of them. So right now they're just doing them as you order, but they asked if I would take a straw poll of people. It's $51 for this class. So if you think that you might be interested in that, just give me a little bit of a sense, just so if I could tell them to print up some so that people aren't waiting. Okay, thanks. And we're also going to have them for 1504 too, that's $25 for positive psych for the course pack there. So, and the other just thing before telling my story that actually speaks to this point that was raised is I wanted to give a shout out to the women's ice hockey team who last weekend had a great victory that in the finals of the ECAC championship, semifinals of the championships, they had a great victory in double overtime against Clarkson, and several players are in this class, and Captain Carrie Schroyer and a couple other senior leaders, Jen Raimondi and Ali Bowe. So I just wanted to acknowledge them here today. Okay. My story actually is about, I taught special needs, actually it was special needs and gifted in the same class in the early 80s when I was in Germany, working at the American Elementary School in Erlangen. It was a military base, and these were the children of the soldiers stationed over there. And it turned out to be a long-term substitute gig for a special ed teacher, special needs teacher there. And the story I tell, it's really actually, it is one of my, I feel like really one of my success stories teaching that I'm proud of, so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to share this. It was a classroom that had only a few students. It was whatever students that day that were having problems in their mainstreamed classroom, they were sent down, and some of them were there for most periods of the day, and some were there for just a couple periods. And I had this one student, Dale, who was there for several periods throughout the day. And he was one of these students who had was easily frustrated. He was a bit disheveled, and sort of like, I don't know if you know the Charlie Brown, the Pigpen character who always had sort of a mess around him. His desk always had, a ton of papers. He liked math a lot, but when he would be doing math problems, if he made any mistake, he would erase hard, and it would go through the paper to the bottom, and he'd get very frustrated. He'd scrunch up the paper and throw it down, and so he had some problems with what they call impulse control and being organized. So one day, just by chance, pen and pencil work were deadly for him. And many of you are doing the Myers-Briggs this week in your sections, and there's been a lot of work connecting Myers-Briggs profiles and learning styles. So he had the learning style that when you talk in your sections about Myers-Briggs, would probably be characterized as sensation on the second dimension and perceiving on the last dimension. So an SP profile, which is more than a third of students in early grades have that profile, and they become less represented as you get further along in the system, and are hardly at all represented in graduate school, because very few teachers in schools are actually structured for this sort of student who basically is a kinesthetic learner, a hands-on learner who needs to be involved in their learning. And that was what Dale was. He was, in fact, in Milton Academy, a school outside of Boston right now, there's a student who's suing his school district because he said this is his learning style and that the school does not meet it. So Dale was definitely one of these students. And so just by chance one day, he was so frustrated doing a long division problem that I had him up the board do it. So when he made a mistake, he still got very frustrated, but he realized that he could just erase and all was not lost. He could actually erase and keep going and not have to start over all the way from the beginning. So he had so much success in this medium that we made him the long division expert of the class, so that anytime anybody needed to learn long division or work on their long division, they would go to Dale. And for at least 3 months, I had probably Dale do nothing else in that class but long division. And I realized what a difference it was making one day when at 7 a.m., right when the school day was starting, he came in and he was like, "Mr. Parati, will you put a long division problem on the board and make it a really long one?" So each day we would have a long division problem on that had I don't know if you even know what long division is. Do people still do that in school? Well, we'll have an example up here on the board. But he had all these numbers, and he would just do long division all day. And the one thing I didn't tell you is that at the very beginning of this, he stuttered horribly. He couldn't finish a sentence without stuttering. And over the course of this time period, which was not much more than 3 months, he stopped stuttering completely. He really blossomed, and I saw such a change in his mood, in his demeanor, and his ability to handle frustration. So there were several things that I think went on that helped this to happen, not the least of which the attention that he got for being successful in this way. But I really think that it was a great example of identifying his strength and cultivating it, and not not teaching the rabbit that he had to swim, and very much connected to the broaden and build theory that Barbara Fredrickson talks about in her article that people read in Positive Psych, that because he experienced success in this area, it really was able to give him a boost of confidence that made it better able to handle his interpersonal relationships and handle other areas of his life. So that's my story with about Dale, and I want to just show you just a few pictures that I dug up from back at this time period that Tal is going to help me with here. So this first picture is here, me in 1983. Haven't changed a bit, huh? I'm wearing a red jumpsuit here. Now, do you think my colleagues knew that I was gay when I walked in with that red jumpsuit that day? I don't know. But, when I look back at it, I'm thinking, what was I thinking, I was obviously much more secure then than I am now. I would never wear that today. But here it was. A crimson jumpsuit, I think. When you look back, you see what messages you were giving off that you may not have known. Okay, so this is airline. This is my class of students here, and they were dyeing eggs that day. So the egg activity, maybe that'll appear in one of my sections. I don't know if people found eggs, got in front of the Science Center today. This was talk about hands-on learning. They were very into that day. You see this one student there with the hood on behind Eddie here with the two eggs, a little to the right. That's the back of a student. That was Anthony. That's his coat, you see, with a hood on. Came into class every day with a hood above his head, and he was one that was just such a troublemaker until the day that we made him in charge of the class, that he was in charge. And then he realized, I can't believe these students, how they're not listening to me. That really changed him. Anyway, so that was special. That was a group of them. This is one day when we went to the zoo. That's Dale. You could see the one, talk about hands-on learning. He was the one here grabbing for the rhinoceros's tusk. What is this, an antler or something? I guess I should know my animals. Behind the zebra there. So that's Dale back there. And then the next picture, I think, is another one. Here's a long division problem. All right. I never knew what you could do with a PowerPoint presentation. All you have to do is Google long division, and you get an image to insert here. Okay. And then this one, that's Dale right there, about to go make friends with the elephant here. And you could see this was at the end of the semester after he had really come out of his shell and was feeling good. Okay? And here is a fabulous movie that is very inspirational about a teacher who was very successful with challenging students. So I recommend this movie to you as well as the title song. And I think if you click one more time, you'll see a little special image there. See, I never knew that could happen. All right. Thank you very much. Okay.
So the interesting thing about the Dell story is how focusing on his strength in one area, and it was a tiny area, had a trickle effect for other areas. The same works in an organization. The same works for you as a leader. If you can identify the things that work with other people who are working for you, working with you, they will blossom not just in that particular area. There will be a trickle effect to other domains. The same in your life. If you focus on your strength and you cultivate your strength, you shed light on it, that seed will blossom, but so will other areas with which you're dealing, some of which may have been weaknesses. You will come out of your shell, so to speak. It's a good metaphor. The other thing I want to do now is show you that video that I promised you last time, which you sent me, with the autistic kid. And many of you have seen it. It's been going around the internet. But here it is. The quality is not amazing, but worth seeing.
Grace Athena High School in Rochester, New York, has a new, most unlikely hero, a special ed student by the name of Jason McElwain. Jason is the basketball team manager. For the past couple years, he's been assisting Coach Jim Johnson, helping with whatever the team needs. Enthusiastic, to say the least. Despite being born with autism, Jason's father says his son has never had a problem expressing himself at basketball games.
I was always concerned that he might get a technical in a losing game because he, start yelling or whatever.
Let's have a hard practice tomorrow. All hour and a half. Let's get ready for K. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, cheer.
Because he has been so devoted to the team, for the last game of the season, Coach Johnson decided to let Jason actually suit up. Not to play necessarily, just to let him feel what it's like to wear a jersey. At least that was the plan. But with 4 minutes to go in last week's game, Coach Johnson stood up and pointed to number 52, Jason McElwain. After years of fetching water and toweling off other people's sweat, Jason was actually in a game. His first shot was a 20-footer from the right baseline.
Was it close? Did you almost win?
I'd like to steer back, please. Let's just get him a basket.
His second shot missed too, but the third was a chunk. A 3-point no-doubter. And Jason wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot.
If I wasn't there to witness it, I wouldn't win it,
You caught fire. I just caught fire. How's high as a pistol?
Jason ended up shooting 6 3-pointers. One right after the other. He had 20 points total, and each time a shot went in, his teammates and the crowd went a little crazy. His last basket, right at the buzzer, created total mayhem. Because he is autistic, Jason says he's used to feeling different, but never this different. Never this wonderful. Steve Hartman, CBS News, Rochester, New York.
I don't know how many times I've watched it. Every time I tear when I see it. It's just so amazing. I've been following the story since I got it by email, and thank you very much for sending it to me. I've been following it on Google and checking out what people are saying about it. And many experts in autism are saying that this could be a breakthrough story for the exact same reason that we've been talking about in class. Because it shows that people with autism, or people with any difficulty, learning disability, social disability, if we learn to identify the things in their lives that they're passionate about. He loves basketball. He wants to be there. I mean, you saw how he came out of his shell. This normally autistic kid just coming out of his shell. When you're finding the intersection between his passions and what turned out to be his strength. I mean, this was a new school record, by the way. What is 20 points in a couple of minutes. So when you identify these things, and everyone has it, it's not what is this child smart. It's what is this child smart at? What is my employee smart at? What am I smart at? Where is my intersection as a leader? Between my passions and my strengths. This is the zone of great leadership. Look what he did. This can transform a life. It has transformed a life. And again, I'm quoting experts on autism, experts on special ed. They say this can transform the lives of many people if we learn to identify that zone of greatness. Passions and strength. Not just a theoretical construct, but one that can really, truly make a difference in our lives and especially as leaders in the lives of others. Let's go back to the vision. Because a vision, in a sense, is the greatness that we want to achieve, whether it's a personal vision that we work on or an organizational vision. And remember, a vision, at least the structure that we will talk about, that you will do your response papers on, comprises 4 parts. It comprises the mission statement, which is like a guiding star, an abstract sentence or two. which is our underlying reason for being. For Nike, it was to crush competition. For Disney, it was to make people happy. Whatever it is for you. The second part are long-term goals, and that's where we're going to start today. Long-term goals, ambitious, concrete, and meaningful goals for 1 to 30 years down the line. You're going to come up with your own long-term goals. Long-term goals are the equivalent of you have the guiding star, which is abstract, which you can't really touch and reach. The long-term goals are concrete. Things you can, it's like the distant shore that you want to get to. These have to be, what does it mean when we say ambitious? Ambitious means that we have a 50% chance of attaining. Richard Hackman, in his work on leading teams, talks about the ideal goals to set are ones that we have a 50% chance of achieving. In the early 60s, John F. Kennedy set the goal for NASA to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. This goal mobilized NASA. This goal led NASA to succeed. After the 20th of July, 1969, when the goal was achieved, there was a significant slump, and you hear it from NASA employees, significant slump in levels of motivation, efficiency, success, because they no longer had the ambitious, concrete. You can't get more concrete than someone taking steps on the moon. Very ambitious, they weren't sure they were going to achieve it, and certainly meaningful. To be the first country to plant its flag on the moon. I want to show you a clip now from the by now historic speech. JFK speaking at Rice University, sharing with the rest of the country what this goal is.
Those who came before us made certain that this country rode the first waves of the Industrial Revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too. For we have given this program a high national priority, even though I realize that this is, in some measure, an act of faith and vision. For we do not now know what benefits await us. But if I were to say, my fellow citizens, that we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses, several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival, on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that of the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first, before this decade is out, then we must be bold.
What a great leader. Then we must be bold. Were you envious when he said almost as hot as it is here today? I was. So, just a couple of things that he said. What he said about the goal, it will organize it. It will bring out our efforts together. This is what a great, bold vision does. It brings people together, as we'll see next time. It brings them toward and channels their energies toward a common goal. This was a real lofty goal. They didn't know they barely made it. By the end of the decade, 20th of July, 1969, there wasn't much to spare. Also, what he said, an act of faith, of vision. This is a great leader. This is a leader who has, quote-unquote, unrealistic optimism. People within NASA said to him, "You're crazy." But there were also people who said to him, "Maybe we can make it." And he took the leap, act of faith. Some of the alloys weren't even invented at that time. That's an act of faith. That's vision. That's seeing a seed. Not seeing the whole tree concretely, seeing the seed and saying it has the potential to be that tree. And then articulating it. I have a dream. That's what it's all about. But it's grounded optimism. It's not detached, Pollyannish, unrealistic optimism. I mean, unrealistic in the true sense. It's seeing the seed and recognizing the potential. And the same applies to a space program or to an individual. An individual such as Dale, an autistic individual, or one who was labeled autistic. It applies to each person, and it applies to the people with whom you will interact as leaders. Scott Snook and I have been working together for over 10 years. One of the projects we were working on, one of the projects that has been the most meaningful thing one of the most meaningful things I've ever done, was working with South African journalists. The story is that in 1995, 1 year after Nelson Mandela came to power, he realized that most of the leaders in most areas in South Africa were still whites. There were very few blacks in leadership positions, and the blacks who were in leadership positions were not trained to be leaders, because one of the things that the apartheid regime did was deprive many of the blacks of the education that they had. And he recognized that there was a need not just for the affirmative action, that wasn't enough. There was a need for real, concrete, actual training. And one of the things that he focused on was on the media. The media very much shapes opinions. He said, we need more black leaders in the media. And what he did toward that end with his ministers, they created a leadership program, a one-year leadership program that was initially a trial program for journalists, later to be expanded to other areas. And that program, most of the time they spent in South Africa in universities, doing leadership courses. 6 weeks out of that 1 year they were going to spend here at Harvard under the Nieman Foundation. The Nieman Foundation that does a lot of work with journalists. Out of that 6 weeks, the Nieman Foundation approached the Harvard Business School and said, can you give us 2 weeks on leadership? Scott Snook was the point person there. He recruited me and he recruited another professor at the Harvard Business School, Joshua Margolis. And together we said, let's put together a 2-week leadership program for them. It was a real challenge to do it. What we decided to do was take them for Outward Bound for a few days to have experiential work, and then to bring them back into the classroom where we taught them. I was the person in charge of the Outward Bound program. I actually went there and I spent days and nights with them, and then went back and taught some of the stuff that I'm teaching here. The experience was extraordinary. From these 2 weeks, I learned much more about leadership than they learned, because all these people were activists. They were very close to Mandela himself, and they were activists in the anti-apartheid movement. And they told me about their experience. They told me something which I found very interesting. They said, you know, until 1994, life was rough, it was tough. This was the or the apartheid era. Life was tough, it was rough. Many of their colleagues had died. Many of their colleagues spent their time in jail doing what they were doing. They were literally living on the edge. They said it was difficult. We didn't know whether we would be alive the day after. We didn't know whether we would be free people the day after, but life was exciting. We had a purpose. We had a calling. We knew what we were here for. Our calling, our vision, our long-term goal was a free South Africa. Concrete, ambitious. They didn't know whether, many of them started in the 60s with Nelson Mandela. They didn't know whether they were going to make it in their lifetime. But we had a reason to get up in the morning. In 1994, when Nelson Mandela came out of prison, out of Robben Island, when he was voted to become the first democratic president of South Africa, there was elation, ecstasy. When they were talking about it to a person, they had tears in their eyes. Euphoric, our dream come true. And they continue to celebrate for weeks and months. But then the celebrations ended. And they were in the day-to-day again. And all of them, to a person, became depressed, unhappy. What am I going to do now with my life? What is my calling? It was there for so many years and suddenly it was achieved, just like NASA. It was there for so many years and suddenly it's gone. We've landed a man on the moon. We have a free South Africa. What now? Well, some of them were able to identify another calling, another goal. Whether it was in journalism, whether it was to build the new South Africa. Some of them found it in their families, because for the first time they could have a family, or a proper family, where they could get up in the morning, spend time with their spouse and with their children, and come back in the evening. So this for them was a calling. This for them, this is what I have worked for my entire life. For others, they weren't able to find a goal that replaced that. And some of them, a small number, but some of them still today, and I'm in touch with some of them today, still feel a void. You see, when people tell us that to be idealistic is to be impractical, that's not true. The exact opposite is true. To be idealistic is the most practical thing in the world, if we want to lead a fulfilling and happy life. Being idealistic is practical. It's a human need to have an ambitious, meaningful goal, to have a vision. It is a human need. Just like we need water and air and social and friends, we also need to have an ideal for which we'll strive. Whether it's a free South Africa, whether it's a man on the moon, whether it's to have a successful business, whether it's to have a happy family, whatever it is, we need that. And we need to articulate it. It needs to be explicit. Both for being more successful, as we'll talk about next time, and for being happier. Let me share with you some examples. First of all, my own. My personal goal, and has been for the last 10 years, is by the time I'm 40, which is 5 years from now, to have a leadership institute. To run a leadership institute which will promote many of the values that I believe in. I'm much closer to it today than I was 10 years ago. Will I achieve it by the age of 40? I don't know. For me, it really is a stretch. And I will have to get out of my comfort zone in many ways. But that's my personal goal. That's what's keeping me moving. Ford. Early in the 1900s, this was Henry Ford's vision, to make it accessible to all people. become the dominant player in the commercial aircraft and bring the world into the jet age. Boeing, back in 1950, they certainly did that. Remember the very competitive mission statement that Nike had from last time? Well, they have an equally, or they had back in 1960 when they were founded, an equally ambitious long-term goal. Remember, a long-term goal is concrete. It's not like a guiding star that you can never touch. It's a distant shore, something that you actually want to achieve. And they did it. Walmart, very concrete, bottom line, by 2000 become that. And Walmart has now a new goal for the year 2010, which they will achieve, or maybe not. But it's something that keeps them going. Now, the prize for the loftiest vision of them all, the loftiest long-term goal, goes to Stanford University, who back in the 1940s had the goal of becoming the Harvard of the West, which to a great extent they have. Not quite there yet, they have a long way to go, but they're getting there. Again, they just started off. How would they differentiate themselves from every other college that was founded at that time? And there were many colleges founded then. This was their concrete long-term goal. Let me move on to the third part of a vision, the core values. Core values are an organization's or person's most fundamental and inviolable codes of action. They're equivalent to the Ten Commandments. Things that are central, that are key to what the document is, because the Bible is a vision. There are the core values that no matter what we don't violate, no matter what. For instance, I walk down the street and I see a person in front of me drop her wallet. And I pick it up and I see in it $100 bills. I will return it to her, even though it's not in my short-term self-interest, because I can make a lot of money right there. No one knows. There's no one around me. I will still return it. Why? Because honesty is an important goal. 99.9% of people would return that wallet, because honesty is an implicit goal for most people. These can be implicit or explicit core values. The ones that I personally make explicit are the ones that I want to be reminded of day in and day out. I read my core values every morning. Every morning I go over them. My personal core values are integrity, which means being honest with others and honest with myself. It's maintaining calm. It's expressing rather than impressing. And again, these things have meaning to me. They may not have meaning to anyone else. They're my core values. It's about having empathy. It's another core value of mine. It's unconditional acceptance toward myself and others, another core value of mine that I remind myself of every morning. And my final core value is happiness, identifying meaning and pleasure in the activities that I do. Let me share with you some core values of organizations. Disney, I love their core values. No cynicism. This is such an important message in today's culture. I love their second value as well, nurturing and promulgation of wholesome American values. Some of these wholesome American values are the no cynicism, are the almost naivete that Americans have always been attributed to Americans. And I think these are the values that made America great, the sense of idealism that we shouldn't lose because it's so practical and so important. Because it's that sense of idealism that landed a person on the moon, that democratized the automobile. At the same time, they're not detached. It's about creativity, dreams, and imagination, and fanatical attention to details. People who have worked with Disney know that. In other words, very concrete. They're grounded. It's Januszian thinking, lofty goals and ideals and naivete and dreaming. And at the same time, pay attention to details. Januszian thinkers there. preservation and control of the Disney magic. That's how they do it. Core values comprise sometimes of a word. For me, it's a word and then followed by a few sentences, or just by sentences like these. And you'll use the template that is given in the article that you'll be reading when you come up with your own. Sony, elevation of the Japanese culture and national status. Above all, and they have been doing it very successfully for a long time. Being a pioneer, not following others, doing the impossible, encouraging individual ability and creativity. There's a lot of Janusyan thinking here because, on the one hand, focus about your country, focus about Japan. Some people associate that with conformity. You know, the nail that sticks out is pounded back in. But they say no. Janusyan thinking, be a pioneer, be individualistic, because that's the only way we'll succeed in this business. Janusyan thinking, looking in both directions at the same time, very successfully. And finally, the last part of a vision is a vivid description. Remember, the first part, a mission statement, long-term goals, core values, and then a vivid description. What a vivid description does, it brings the vision to life through words that create images. This is a certain paragraph that you will come up with, but this also applies, as we'll see next time, to your entire vision. You want to make it real. You want to make it vivid. You want it to inspire through words, through stories, through images, and through metaphors. Certainly the last part, but the entire vision as well when you communicate it. Much more on that later. Collins and Porras say, think of it as translating the vision from words into pictures or creating an image that people can carry around in their heads. An example, an automobile. Ford, back in the 1900s, early 1900s. I will build a motor car for the great multitude. It will be so low in price that no man making a good salary will be unable to own one, and enjoy with his family the blessing of hours of pleasure in God's great open spaces. When I'm through, everybody will be able to afford one, and everyone will have one. The horse will have disappeared from our highways. The automobile will be taken for granted. And we will give a large number of men employment at good wages. Is it there? Maybe not quite yet, but getting close. Vivid description of his dream. He was a visionary. Many people called Henry Ford detached, Pollyannish, unrealistic. Yes, he was unrealistically optimistic, but not really, because he saw the seed, and he realized that being idealistic, having a lofty vision, is the most practical thing a leader can do. I'll see you on Friday.